No longer threatened by immediate NATO airstrikes, international relief agencies are heading back into Kosovo. Their task there is enormous, as our guest can confirm. Serge Duss is Associate Director of Public Policy and Government Relations at World Vision. World Vision is a U.S.-based relief organization working closely with the Mother Teresa Society and other agencies in Kosovo. Thanks so much for joining us today. When were you last in Kosovo?
I was there about a week ago for about 8 days.
How dire is the situation for the refugees?
It's very dire. There are about 500,000 Albanians who are displaced throughout Kosovo, about 100,000 that are trying to survive in the open. It's a desperate situation, particularly as winter approaches.
Describe the conditions under which they're living.
The 100,000 are living out in the open, in the mountains, in the valleys. They have plastic tents, cloth tents, trying to survive with open fires. Sanitation is terrible. Particularly the children and the elderly are becoming sicker and sicker. Those that are able to find shelter with friends, relatives, strangers, they've pretty much consumed winter food stocks, so they are at the wall.
You mentioned winter, obviously a major concern. How close is the bad weather, the severe weather?
Well, I saw on the news yesterday that the rain was falling. We expect snow at the end of October, and the Balkans are known for their brutal winters.
We now have an agreement which has forestalled military action in Kosovo. Do you believe that's going to make a difference to the future of the refugees?
Quite frankly, no. Based on what refugees and displaced people told me while I was in Kosovo, was that they would not return to their villages and homes as long as Serb paramilitary police remained. The agreement provides for Milosevic to downsize his military and police presence from 29,000 to 19,000. So essentially what we have is 19,000 police and military Serb forces versus 2,000 OSCE civilian verifiers. That's not much of a match.
The feeling is the verifiers simply can't do the job, can't adequately police the policemen?
They can't. They're civilians. What can they do? They can observe, they can report. Only NATO military personnel are qualified to determine whether the Serb military and police are abiding by the provisions of this agreement between Milosevic and Richard Holbrooke. Civilians, what can they do if they find that Serbs are shelling, that they are preventing refugees from returning home, if they're preventing humanitarian organizations to go where the refugees are? What can civilians do? Is
fear, quite frankly, the biggest factor here, stopping the refugees from returning home?
Fear is the #1 factor. I met a group of displaced who were leaving a town that was shelled, and we ran into an individual who spoke excellent English. He was a teacher. He told me that he and his family that had been out in the open for already 2 months, they would rather die in the mountains than return to their homes where they would be killed by the Serb police.
Do they have homes to return to?
Many do have homes. They're in various stages of destruction. Homes have been first shelled by the Serbs, and then they were burned, and all of their belongings were stolen. Many villages that I traveled to, you could see that there had fires had taken place, and the homes were virtually empty of any goods.
You may not be happy with this agreement, but there is an agreement. So what does an agency like yours do?
We really have no choice. We must move ahead. Humanitarian supplies are in place. I would say the pipeline is full from the U.S. government as well as European states. We will try to take humanitarian aid wherever we can, but we are also advocating with government officials to take care of their responsibility to provide for security for displaced people and to deal tough with Milosevic. We can only look back at Bosnia and see what the history was.
Do you feel that the refugees were ignored in the brokering of this agreement?
I think to a large part they were. Our question is, will this deal allow refugees to return home? My answer is, based on the news that we have, they will not return home.
Is there any problem with quantity? Can you get the material you need to help these people, and can you get it to all of them?
It will be difficult getting to all of them where they are now. The best way to get humanitarian aid is to get it to them in their homes, in towns and villages where they come from, so they can on their own already be rebuilding for the future. But if they cannot return home, it will make delivery of humanitarian assistance difficult. We can do it, but it will be difficult.
What should have happened here?
What should have happened is that if NATO was willing to launch airstrikes against Serb Yugoslavian military positions, at least they could have provided an armed NATO force on the ground to be able to verify whether the Serbs were complying with the agreement, and also to provide the necessary security for the displaced to feel safe so that they could return home.
You know there is no appetite for an armed NATO ground force in Kosovo.
Well, we have NATO armed forces in Bosnia as prevented fighting. In 1992, President Bush sent 500 American troops to Macedonia, along with about 300 Nordic troops. That prevented the war from spreading from Bosnia into Macedonia. It's a small show of credible force prevented violence from breaking out in Macedonia. The same thing could have been done in Kosovo.
And with that, our thanks to Serge Duss of World Vision, a U.S.-based relief agency aiding the refugees in Kosovo. Business and sports reports are ahead on World News from Washington.